Zara Washington stands frozen in disbelief as airport security drags her away from the boarding gate, her law school graduation trip to Paris disintegrating before her eyes. The white gate agent smirks watching the passport pieces disappear into the trash can. The phone in Zara's pocket continues recording everything. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe justice should be served when people abuse their power. Trust me, you'll want to see how Zara turns this devastating moment into something that changes an entire industry. For Zara Washington, a 25-year-old black woman from Baltimore, this Paris trip represented more than just a vacation. It symbolized everything she had fought for during her 3 grueling years at Howard University Law School. The daughter of Tamara Washington, a hospital janitor who often worked 16-hour days to keep their small apartment, Zara had defied every statistic and expectation placed on a girl from her neighborhood. "Mom, I can't believe we're actually doing this," Zara had said the night before during their celebration dinner at Tamara's favorite local restaurant. Her mother's eyes had welled with tears. "Baby girl, you earned every bit of this. Your father would have been so proud." Tamara squeezed her daughter's hand across the table. Zara's father had passed away from cancer when she was just 11. But his dream of seeing his daughter succeed had been the driving force behind her determination. Riley Thompson, Zara's best friend since middle school, raised a glass. "To the future. International human rights attorney Paris, better get ready." The trip to Paris wasn't random. Zara had fallen in love with the city through the stories of Josephine Baker and James Baldwin, Black Americans who had found recognition in France that America had denied them. She'd spent years learning French between work shifts and study sessions. Her wall featured photos of pioneering black lawyers like Constance Baker Motley and Thurgood Marshall alongside the Eiffel Tower. That morning, Zara had triple-checked her documents neatly arranged in a leather portfolio her mother had given her as a graduation gift. Her navy blue passport with its embossed golden eagle felt like a ticket to a future where borders couldn't contain her ambitions. "Your passport and boarding passes are in the front pocket," Tamara reminded her, straightening Zara's collar in the hallway of their apartment. "Call me as soon as you land." The Uber ride to Baltimore Washington International had been filled with excitement. The driver, an older Haitian man named Marcel, had smiled broadly in the rearview mirror when she mentioned Paris. "Ah, Paris, the most beautiful city. You will love it, mademoiselle," he'd said, his accent thick but warm. "My daughter studies at the Sorbonne. Maybe you will see her there." Zara had felt like the universe was aligning to make this journey perfect. After checking in at BWI with no issues, she boarded her first flight to Atlanta, where she would catch her connecting flight to Paris. The anticipation had built with every mile in the air, every announcement bringing her closer to her dream. Little did she know that at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, her dream was about to collide with a nightmare named Bethany Russell. Zara stepped off the plane in Atlanta with 2 hours to spare before her connecting flight to Paris. The airport bustled with travelers rushing in all directions, announcements echoing through the cavernous terminals. She followed the signs toward her departure gate, stopping briefly at a cafe to grab a latte. Heading somewhere exciting, asked the barista, a young man with a friendly smile and a name tag that read Jamal. Paris, Zara replied, unable to contain her excitement. "Law school graduation trip." "Congratulations, that's impressive," Jamal said, handing her the coffee with a genuine smile. "Enjoy every minute of it. You earned it." These small, positive interactions continued as Zara made her way through the airport. A security guard gave her directions with a respectful "ma'am," and an elderly couple chatted amiably with her while they waited for the tram between terminals. For a moment, Zara felt the warm glow of ordinary human connection, the simple dignity of being treated like anyone else. That feeling evaporated the instant she approached Gate B22. Behind the counter stood Bethany Russell, a 42-year-old gate agent with bleached blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Bethany had worked for Atlantic Airways for 15 years and had developed a reputation among her colleagues for what they privately called her special treatment of certain passengers. Zara noticed the immediate change in Bethany's demeanor when she approached the counter. Just seconds before, Bethany had been smiling and chatting with a middle-aged white couple checking their documents with casual efficiency. Her face had been animated, friendly, even sharing a joke that made the couple laugh as they walked toward the boarding area. When Zara stepped up, Bethany's smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her mouth tightening into a thin line. "Boarding pass and passport," she said flatly, not making eye contact. Zara pulled out her perfectly organized documents and slid them across the counter. "I'm so excited for this trip," she offered, trying to establish the same rapport Bethany had shown the previous passengers. Bethany ignored the comment, taking the passport with her fingertips as though reluctant to touch it. She flipped through the pages with exaggerated scrutiny, squinting at each visa stamp. "Is this your first time traveling internationally?" Bethany asked, her tone suggesting doubt. "No, I've been to Canada and Mexico before," Zara replied politely. "But this is my first time to Europe." Bethany muttered, turning the passport over and examining the cover with unusual intensity. "What's the purpose of your trip?" "It's a graduation trip. I just finished law school," Zara explained, maintaining her composure despite the growing knot in her stomach. She'd traveled enough to recognize when she was receiving different treatment. A few feet away, Derek Mitchell, a 38-year-old white business executive waiting for the same flight, glanced up from his laptop. He'd witnessed the warm exchange with the previous passengers and now noticed the palpable shift in atmosphere. Something about the gate agent's body language and tone caught his attention. "Where will you be staying in Paris?" Bethany continued questions that hadn't been asked of other passengers. "Hotel Lumière in the 8th arrondissement." Zara answered promptly. "I have the reservation details if you need to see them." "That's quite an expensive area," Bethany remarked with raised eyebrows. Zara took a deep breath, reminding herself of all the times her mother had warned her. "You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far, and you'll need to control your reactions when people try to provoke you." The memories flooded back. The high school counselor who suggested community college instead of Howard University, despite her 4 gigapascals. The law firm interviewer who expressed surprise at her articulate answers. The store security guard who followed her through departments while ignoring other shoppers. "I saved for this trip for 3 years, Zara explained, keeping her voice level. "I worked through law school." Bethany's lips pursed, as though tasting something sour. She reached for a magnifying glass from a drawer and began examining the passport's security features with theatrical diligence. Derek Mitchell closed his laptop and moved a step closer, pretending to check the departure board while keeping the interaction in his peripheral vision. 20 years in corporate America had taught him to recognize power plays and microaggressions. What he was witnessing made him increasingly uncomfortable. "There seems to be an issue with your passport," Bethany finally announced loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Zara felt her heart sink, but kept her face neutral. "What kind of issue?" she asked calmly. "I'll need to verify some things," Bethany replied vaguely. "Please step aside while I call my supervisor." As Zara moved to the side of the counter, she caught Derek's eye briefly. His expression of concern confirmed what she already knew. This wasn't normal procedure. This was something else entirely. Bethany spoke in hushed tones into her phone, occasionally glancing at Zara with undisguised suspicion. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The flight's boarding time approached, and Zara felt anxiety building in her chest. Other passengers filed past her to have their documents checked by another gate agent who had appeared to keep the line moving. Finally, Kenneth Porter, a balding man in his 50s wearing a supervisor's badge, arrived at the counter. He nodded briefly to Zara before turning to Bethany. "What seems to be the problem here?" He asked, his voice carrying the weary tone of someone who'd been called away from more important matters. "I've detected some irregularities with this passenger's passport," Bethany stated, emphasizing this passenger in a way that made Zara clench her jaw. "The watermark appears slightly off, and the binding doesn't look standard." Zara stepped forward. "Sir, I've had this passport for 5 years. I've traveled internationally before without any issues." Bethany cut her off. "The passenger claims to be a law student going to Paris alone. Given the discrepancies I've noticed, I thought it warranted additional verification." Kenneth barely glanced at the passport. "What discrepancies specifically?" Before Bethany could answer, Zara interjected. "Excuse me, but there are no discrepancies with my passport. It was issued by the State Department like everyone else's. I have secondary ID if that would help." She reached for her wallet. "Ma'am, please let us do our job," Kenneth said, his tone more dismissive than reassuring. "Bethany has been doing this for 15 years. If she says there's an issue we need to investigate..." By now, several nearby passengers had slowed their pace, watching the interaction unfold. Derek Mitchell had abandoned all pretense of disinterest and stood a few feet away, openly observing. Zara felt a familiar hollowness in her stomach, the physical manifestation of being dismissed, of having her reality denied. With practiced discretion, she reached into her pocket and activated her phone's recording function, leaving it partially visible in her jacket pocket. Years of experiencing situations like this had taught her the value of documentation. "Perhaps we should move this discussion somewhere more private," Bethany suggested, noticing the growing audience. "I'm comfortable having this conversation right here," Zara replied firmly. "I'd like to know exactly what's wrong with my passport so we can resolve it quickly. My flight board's in 20 minutes. Kenneth sighed. "Look, we're just following protocol. International security is no joke." "I understand that," Zara said. "But I don't understand why my passport is being questioned when I've used it multiple times before without issue." As the conversation continued in circles, a new figure approached. Raymond Davis, the airline's operations manager for the terminal, drawn by the unusual length of the interaction. In his 45 years with graying temples and a carefully maintained mustache, Raymond had seen just about everything in airport operations. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, eyes moving between Kenneth, Bethany, and Zara. Bethany immediately straightened her posture. "Mr. Davis, I was just explaining to Kenneth that this passenger's passport has several security concerns. I'm recommending we contact TSA for verification." Zara took a deep breath, summoning every lesson from her mother. Tamara's words echoed in her mind. There will be moments when people with authority will try to make you feel small. Stand tall. Speak clearly, but never give them the reaction they're trying to provoke. Mr. Davis. Zara began her law school training, evident in her measured tone. "I've been standing here for nearly 15 minutes while my valid U.S. passport is being questioned without any specific concerns being identified. I respectfully request that you review it yourself and allow me to board my flight if, as I'm certain, you find it to be legitimate." Raymond looked momentarily taken aback by her composed eloquence. He reached for the passport, but Bethany kept her grip on it. "Sir, I really think we should follow the full security protocol here," Bethany insisted. Derek Mitchell chose this moment to step forward. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Raymond. "I couldn't help but notice this situation. I'm on the same flight, and I have to say this level of scrutiny seems unusual. I wasn't questioned about my passport at all." Bethany's face flushed. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "Actually," Derek continued calmly, "as a Diamond Medallion member who flies with your airline weekly, I'm concerned about inconsistent treatment of passengers." Raymond's expression shifted subtly. The mention of the elite status clearly registered. "Let me have a look at that passport," he said more firmly to Bethany. The situation had reached a tipping point. What happened next would either diffuse the tension or send it spiraling beyond control. "I need to take this for verification." Bethany declared, clutching the passport tighter as Raymond reached for it. Her knuckles whitened around the navy blue booklet containing Zara's identity, dreams, and hard-earned right to travel. "Miss Russell, please hand me the passport so I can examine it," Raymond insisted, his patience visibly thinning. "It's standard procedure to verify suspicious documents in our secure area," Bethany countered, taking a step back from the counter. Zara felt her heartbeat accelerate. "My passport hasn't left my sight during international travel. That's actually the recommendation of the State Department." "Are you telling me how to do my job?" Bethany snapped, her professional veneer cracking. "No, I'm stating a fact about passport security," Zara replied, struggling to maintain her composure. Kenneth stepped between them. "Let's all calm down. Bethany, why don't you show me the specific issues you've identified?" With visible reluctance, Bethany placed the passport on the counter and pointed to various features, leaning over it possessively. "The watermark looks off here. The binding seems unusual. And this stamp from her supposed trip to Canada looks suspicious." Zara leaned forward. "There's nothing wrong with my passport. Those are standard security features. And that stamp was issued by Canadian Border Control in Toronto 2 years ago." Raymond reached for the passport, but as he did, Bethany suddenly seized it again. "I need to check something," she muttered, turning away and walking a few steps from the counter. What happened next occurred in a blur of motion that Zara's phone camera captured with perfect clarity. Bethany's hands worked quickly, a deliberate tug, the sound of tearing. Then, with a flick of her wrist that could never be mistaken for accidental, the passport was in pieces, several pages separated from the binding. "Oh," Bethany exclaimed with theatrical surprise, "it just fell apart in my hands. You see, this confirms it wasn't properly manufactured." Time seemed to stop. Zara watched in horror as Bethany dropped the mangled pieces into a trash can behind the counter. "What did you just do?" Zara's voice emerged as barely more than a whisper, shock temporarily overwhelming her. "This document is clearly fraudulent," Bethany declared loudly. "It wouldn't have torn if it were authentic." Derek stepped forward. "I just witnessed you deliberately tear that passport. Everyone here saw what you did." Raymond stared in disbelief. "Bethany, did you just destroy a passenger's passport?" Instead of responding to him, Bethany pressed a button on her console. "Security to Gate B22. Passenger becoming aggressive over identification issues." "I haven't moved," Zara said, finding her voice again. Her hand went to her pocket, confirming her phone was still recording. "But you just destroyed my passport and threw it in the trash." Kenneth looked deeply uncomfortable, now caught between loyalty to his colleague and the undeniable reality of what had just occurred. Bethany's voice rose. She was trying to board with fraudulent documents, and now she's making false accusations. "This is exactly why we have security protocols." 2 airport security officers approached rapidly. Bethany immediately addressed them. This passenger attempted to board with a fake passport and became confrontational when questioned. Zara stood perfectly still, aware that any movement could be misinterpreted. Tears of rage and frustration threatened, but she blinked them back. "I need someone to retrieve my passport from that trash can before she removes the evidence," she stated clearly. The security officers looked to Raymond, who seemed genuinely conflicted. "Miss Russell, please step away from the counter," he finally ordered. "I was just doing my job." Bethany protested but moved aside. Raymond turned to one of the security officers. "Can you please check the trash can behind the counter?" Before the officer could move, Bethany quickly added, "There's nothing in there but torn paper." The passport was falling apart, proving it was counterfeit. What do you think about Bethany's actions? Comment 1 if you believe she should be immediately fired for what she did. Hit like if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination like Zara faced. Subscribe to see more stories of justice prevailing against all odds. The security officer hesitated, looking between Raymond and Bethany. Would they recover the evidence before it disappeared forever? And how would Zara respond as her dream trip slipped away because of one person's prejudice? What would you do in her situation? Zara found herself seated in a small windowless room within the airport's security area. The stark fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across the metal table where she sat with her hands folded. Her phone had been confiscated upon entry, standard procedure, they'd said, but not before she'd managed to send the recording to Riley and her mother with a quick text: "Discrimination at ATL Airport. Recording evidence. Call me as soon as possible." The initial shock had given way to a hollow feeling. 3 years of law school, thousands of dollars saved, countless dreams of standing beneath the Eiffel Tower, all potentially destroyed by one woman's prejudice. The door opened, and a security officer she hadn't seen before entered, followed by a younger black woman in an Atlantic Airways uniform. The officer nodded curtly. "Ms. Washington, this is Jordan Harrison from Atlantic Airways Customer Relations. She'd like to speak with you." The officer left, closing the door behind him. Jordan, about 34, with close-cropped natural hair and intelligent eyes, took a seat across from Zara. "Miss Washington, I'm truly sorry about what happened at the gate," she began, her voice low and sincere. "I've worked for this airline for 8 years, and what occurred today is completely unacceptable." Zara studied the woman's face, looking for signs of the corporate damage control she'd learned to recognize during her law school internships. "They destroyed my passport," Zara stated flatly, "and confiscated my phone containing evidence." Jordan slid a clear plastic bag across the table. Inside was Zara's phone. "I've arranged for your personal items to be returned immediately," Jordan explained. "And I need you to know that I believe you." "Bethany Russell has a history." Zara picked up her phone, checking to confirm the recording was still there. "A history of what exactly?" "Complaints, mostly filed by passengers of color who experienced enhanced scrutiny at her counter. Nothing ever serious enough to warrant termination under current policies. At least, that's what management claims." Jordan's expression hardened slightly. "But destroying a passport crosses every line. The problem is proving it was deliberate." "I have it on video," Zara said. "I started recording when things got suspicious." Jordan's eyes widened slightly. "That changes everything. Would you be willing to share that with me?" "Not officially yet. Just me. I want to help, but I need to know what we're dealing with." As Zara considered the offer, the door opened again. This time, Derek Mitchell entered, accompanied by the same security officer. "Miss Washington," Derek said with evident relief, "I've been trying to find you since they took you away from the gate." Mr. Mitchell insisted on providing a witness statement, the officer explained somewhat apologetically. He was persistent. "Damn right I was," Derek replied. "What happened at that gate was blatant discrimination, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't see it." Jordan introduced herself to Derek, who explained he was a frequent business traveler and had witnessed the entire incident. "I've already called my company's legal department," Derek added. "They're prepared to provide any necessary support. What happened today wasn't just wrong, it was illegal." As they talked, Zara's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a direct message on Instagram from someone named Isabella Rodriguez. "Hi Zara, I was at gate B22 and filmed what happened. That woman tore your passport deliberately. I have 350 Kelvin's followers and can help get the truth out. DM me if you need the video." Zara showed the message to Jordan and Derek. "Who is she?" Jordan asked. "A social media influencer," Derek replied, quickly checking Isabella's profile on his own phone. "Travel and social justice content. Looks legitimate, and she has the reach to make this go viral." "This doesn't have to become a public spectacle," Jordan said carefully. "The company would prefer to handle this internally." "I'm sure they would," Zara replied, her legal training kicking in. But what's your personal take on this, Jordan? Not as an airline employee, but as a human being. Jordan glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. Off the record, Bethany Russell should have been fired years ago. There have been at least 7 formal complaints against her that I know of, all filed by black or brown passengers. All of them mysteriously resolved with no disciplinary action. Why? Derek asked. Her brother-in-law is James Whitfield, VP of North American Operations. Jordan explained. Family connections matter in this company. Zara absorbed this information, her mind already constructing a strategy. So we're dealing with institutional protection of discriminatory behavior. Exactly, Jordan confirmed. But destroying a federal document is different. Even Whitfield can't ignore that, if we can prove it was deliberate. Between my recording Derek's testimony and this Instagram influencer's video, I think we have proof, Zara said. The question is, what's the best way to use it? Derek checked his watch. My flight to Paris leaves in 2 hours. I'm happy to postpone if needed, but I think we need a plan now. Jordan made a decision. Let me make some calls. There are people higher up than Whitfield who won't want this kind of publicity. Give me 30 minutes. As Jordan left the room, Zara turned to Derek. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Derek was quiet for a moment. I've spent 20 years in corporate America watching this kind of thing happen. Usually, I've just been a bystander. Told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But watching what happened today, he shook his head. My silence would make me complicit. Zara nodded, understanding. She sent a quick reply to Isabella, arranging to connect. Within minutes, she received Isabella's video shot from a different angle than her own recording, capturing Bethany's deliberate tearing motion with perfect clarity. By the time Jordan returned, an unlikely alliance had formed: a black law graduate, a white business executive, a Hispanic social media influencer connected remotely, and a black airline employee risking her job. Each brought different resources and perspectives to the table, united against an injustice that was now thoroughly documented. I've spoken with Patricia Coleman, our Senior VP of Customer Relations, Jordan announced. She's reviewing the situation personally and wants to meet with you immediately. I should warn you, they'll try to offer compensation and confidentiality agreements. They can try, Zara replied, a new determination in her voice. But first they need to understand exactly what happened and who's responsible. As they prepared to leave the security room, Zara felt a strange calm settling over her. Her Paris trip might be in ruins, but something more important had taken its place. An opportunity to challenge the systems that had allowed Bethany Russell to discriminate with impunity for years. Let's go, she said, gathering her belongings. I think Atlantic Airways is about to get an unexpected lesson in accountability. The conference room on the administrative level of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport hummed with tension. Zara sat with perfect posture at one end of the polished table, flanked by Derek and Jordan. Across from them sat Raymond Davis, Kenneth Porter, and a nervous-looking woman from the legal department who had introduced herself as Monica Winters. At the head of the table was Patricia Coleman, Senior VP of Customer Relations for Atlantic Airways. In her mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and a tailored navy suit, she radiated the kind of authority that came from navigating corporate crises for decades. Miss Washington, Patricia began. First, let me express my sincere regret for your experience today. What you've described is completely unacceptable and contradicts our company values of respect and inclusion. Zara maintained steady eye contact. I appreciate that, Miss Coleman. However, I'm concerned less with words and more with actions. Right now, my passport is destroyed, my flight has departed without me, and the person responsible is presumably still working at your gate. Patricia nodded. We're conducting a thorough investigation. Miss Russell has been temporarily removed from customer-facing duties pending. Temporarily, Derek interjected. There are multiple videos showing her deliberately destroying a federal document. What exactly requires investigation? Monica Winters shifted uncomfortably. "We have established protocols for employee disciplinary actions that must be followed regardless of circumstances." Zara opened her laptop. "Let me be clear about the situation from a legal perspective." Her 3 years of law school training were evident in her methodical approach. What occurred today constitutes multiple violations of both federal law and company policy. She turned the screen toward Patricia, showing a neatly organized document she had created while waiting for the meeting. Destruction of a U.S. passport violates Title 18, Section 1543 of the U.S. Code of Federal Offense. Additionally, discrimination based on race in public accommodations violates Title II of the Civil Rights Act. Patricia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed concern. "Miss Washington, we're not denying the seriousness." "I'm not finished," Zara continued calmly. "Atlantic Airways' own customer commitment policy states, and I quote, 'All passengers will be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, or age.'" Misquote. Russell's actions clearly violated this commitment. Jordan, who had been quietly observing, now spoke up. "Miss Coleman, there's something else you should know." She slid a folder across the table. "These are copies of 7 formal complaints filed against Bethany Russell over the past 3 years. All by passengers of color, all alleging discriminatory treatment, all mysteriously resolved, with no disciplinary action." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "How did you access these files, Miss Harrison?" "That's not the relevant question," Jordan replied evenly. "The relevant question is why these complaints were systematically ignored by management." Kenneth Porter shifted nervously in his seat. "I wasn't aware of any pattern of complaints." "Weren't you?" Derek asked, his business experience evident in his tactical approach. "As her direct supervisor, did you never notice Miss Russell's behavior varied dramatically depending on the passenger's race?" "Because I observed it within minutes of standing at your gate." Kenneth looked away, his silence damning. Raymond Davis cleared his throat. "I've only been managing this terminal for 6 months. This is the first incident of this nature I've personally witnessed, but not the first you've heard about," Jordan pressed. "Several gate agents have reported concerns informally. They were told not to make waves." Monica Winters jumped in. "These are serious allegations that would require separate investigation. Today's incident is our current focus." Zara nodded. "Fair enough. Let's focus on today." She pressed play on her laptop and the recording began. The audio captured Bethany's increasingly hostile tone, culminating in the unmistakable sound of tearing paper and Bethany's theatrical "oh" of false surprise. Patricia watched with growing dismay. When the recording ended, Zara opened another file, Isabella Rodriguez's video, which clearly showed Bethany's deliberate tearing motion from a different angle. "We also have Mr. Mitchell's eyewitness testimony," Zara added, "and potentially statements from other passengers who witnessed the incident." The room fell silent. Monica Winters scribbled furiously on her notepad while Patricia stared at the now blank screen. "What are you seeking, Miss Washington?" Patricia finally asked, her tone carefully measured. Zara had anticipated this question. First, immediate termination of Bethany Russell. Not paid leave, not reassignment, termination for cause. Patricia glanced at Monica, who gave a subtle nod. Second, Zara continued a comprehensive review of all discrimination complaints across your airline for the past 5 years, conducted by an independent third party with results made public. This request visibly unsettled the executives. "That would be unprecedented," Monica objected. "So is having my passport deliberately destroyed by your employee," Zara countered. Third, implementation of mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, designed by experts in the field, not just a corporate checkbox exercise. Derek nodded appreciatively at this point. Fourth, a formal apology and compensation for my ruined trip, additional expenses incurred, and emotional distress. Patricia leaned forward. Miss Washington, we're prepared to offer generous compensation and immediate arrangements for a new passport and rescheduled trip. As for the other requests, we'll need time to. Time is precisely what you don't have. Derek interrupted, checking his watch. Isabella Rodriguez has 350,000 followers waiting for an update. The video of your employee destroying a Black Law graduate's passport could be online in minutes. That would be unfortunate, Monica said, her tone hardening slightly. We were hoping to resolve this matter discreetly with appropriate compensation. By discreetly, you mean with an NDA, Zara stated, rather than asked. That's not acceptable. What happened today wasn't just about me. It represents a pattern of behavior that affects countless travelers. My silence isn't for sale. Jordan straightened in her chair. Miss Coleman, with respect, this isn't just a PR problem. It's a human problem. Atlantic Airways has an opportunity to lead the industry in addressing discrimination rather than burying it. Patricia studied each face around the table, weighing options and calculating risks. I need to make some calls, she finally said. Can you give me 30 minutes? As the executives filed out of the room, Derek turned to Zara. You were brilliant, he said quietly, like watching a masterclass in negotiation. Zara felt a complex mixture of emotions, pride in her performance, lingering anger about her treatment, and uncertainty about the outcome. They're going to try to minimize this, she predicted. Probably offer more money in exchange for dropping the systemic changes. Jordan nodded in agreement. That's the standard playbook. Individual compensation is cheaper than structural change. Then, we need leverage they can't ignore, Zara said, pulling out her phone. What are you thinking? Derek asked. Isabella isn't our only potential ally, Zara explained, scrolling through her contacts. My law school classmate works for the Washington Post. Another interned at the ACLU last summer. And my mother's church group includes 3 state representatives. A slow smile spread across Derek's face. You're not just looking for personal justice. No, Zara confirmed, her purpose crystallizing with each passing moment. I'm looking for change. The next 48 hours unfolded with the intensity of a high-stakes chess match. Atlantic Airways had quickly realized they were dealing with more than an isolated incident or a disgruntled passenger. Zara Washington, with her legal training, strategic mind, and growing coalition of supporters, represented a force they couldn't easily dismiss. Patricia Coleman had returned to that initial meeting with a revised offer: immediate termination for Bethany Russell, expedited passport replacement with all fees covered, first-class rescheduled travel to Paris with additional middles offerment, compensation, and a personal apology from the CEO. But when she'd slid the confidentiality agreement across the table, Zara had simply shaken her head. This isn't just about me, she'd repeated. The systematic changes aren't negotiable. Now, Zara sat in a hotel suite provided by the airline, coordinating with her unexpected team of allies. Derek had postponed his business trip to remain in Atlanta, putting his considerable corporate influence behind her cause. Jordan continued providing crucial insider information while walking a delicate line to protect her job. Isabella had strategically shared a carefully edited version of the incident on her platforms, generating over 2 million views and thousands of comments from people sharing similar experiences. A knock at the suite door revealed a courier with an express package. Zara's temporary passport processed with unprecedented speed through the State Department's emergency channels. Atlantic Airways had pulled significant strings to expedite the process, a tacit acknowledgement of their liability. At least they're taking the passport destruction seriously, Derek observed as Zara signed for the package. They have to, Jordan replied, looking up from her laptop. Destroying a federal document is indefensible, but I'm more concerned with what I've been finding in our internal systems. She turned her screen toward them, displaying a spreadsheet she'd compiled. These are all the formal complaints filed against gate agents for discriminatory behavior over the past 3 years. I've color-coded them by resolution status. Zara studied the data, her legal mind immediately spotting the pattern. Almost all complaints filed by passengers of color were marked unsubstantiated or were solved without action. Exactly, Jordan confirmed. Meanwhile, complaints from white passengers, especially those with elite status, received immediate response and often resulted in disciplinary action.
"We need to get this too," Patricia Derrick said. "This is exactly the kind of documentation that forces corporate action."
"There's more," Jordan continued, her voice lowering slightly. "I accessed the security footage archive. Bethany's incident with Zara wasn't isolated. I've identified at least 5 other incidents where she subjected passengers of color to extraordinary scrutiny or denied boarding for questionable reasons." "Can you download those videos?" Zara asked. Jordan shook her head. "Not without leaving digital fingerprints that would identify me, but I've noted the exact timestamps and gate numbers. With a subpoena, they'd be discoverable." Derrick whistled softly. "You're risking your job with this, Jordan." "Some things are more important than a paycheck," Jordan replied simply. Zara's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Kenneth Porter. She put it on speaker. "Miss Washington, I hope I'm not interrupting Kenneth," began, his tone markedly more respectful than during their first encounter. "Not at all, Mr. Porter. What can I do for you?" "I've been thinking about our interaction at the gate," he said, hesitation evident in his voice, "and about other incidents I've witnessed but didn't address. I'd like to speak with Atlantic Airways investigators about what I've observed regarding Bethany's pattern of behavior." Zara exchanged surprised glances with Derrick and Jordan. "That would be very helpful, Mr. Porter. May I ask what prompted this decision?" A heavy sigh came through the speaker. "After you were escorted away, I checked the trash can myself. What Bethany did was deliberate. I saw the torn pieces. But more than that, I've known for years that she treats certain passengers differently. I convinced myself it wasn't my place to intervene." "It's everyone's place to intervene when witnessing discrimination," Zara said firmly. "Yes," Kenneth agreed, sounding genuinely contrite. "I understand that now. Better late than never, I hope." After the call ended, Isabella arrived at the suite, bringing news of her own. "The story is gaining serious traction," she reported, showing them her analytics. "Major news outlets have reached out for interviews, and I've been directing them to contact you directly." "Perfect timing," Derrick said, checking his own phone. "I just heard from my contact on Atlantic's board of directors. They've called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. This situation has their full attention now." Meanwhile, across town, in Atlantic Airways headquarters, Patricia Coleman sat in a tense meeting with James Whitfield, VP of North American Operations, and Bethany Russell's brother-in-law. "This is a witch hunt," Whitfield insisted, his face flushed with anger. "Bethany has been loyal to this company for 15 years. Patricia pushed a tablet across the table, playing the video evidence without comment. "Loyalty doesn't excuse destroying a federal document, James. Or the pattern of discriminatory behavior our preliminary investigation has already uncovered." "Pattern? What pattern?" Whitfield demanded. "A few disgruntled passengers making unsubstantiated claims. 7 formal complaints in 3 years, all from passengers of color," Patricia countered. "All mysteriously resolved during your review process. Care to explain that pattern?" Whitfield's expression hardened. "You're overreacting to social media pressure. This Washington woman is leveraging one unfortunate incident into a crusade. An unfortunate incident that was clearly deliberate, captured on multiple recordings and witnessed by several passengers." Patricia corrected him. "And Miss Washington happens to be a law school graduate with a growing coalition of supporters and media interest. This isn't going away." "So, what are you suggesting?" Whitfield asked, his tone defensive. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm informing you that the board has authorized a comprehensive third-party investigation of our complaint resolution processes." particularly regarding allegations of discriminatory treatment. Patricia's tone left no room for debate. Additionally, Bethany's termination has been processed effective immediately. You can't do that without— It's already done, Patricia interrupted. And James, the investigation will include reviewing how previous complaints were handled and by whom. I strongly suggest you cooperate fully. As these parallel developments unfolded, Zara received an unexpected call from Raymond Davis. Miss Washington, I want to personally apologize for not acting more decisively when I witnessed Miss Russell's behavior, he began. I've submitted my statement to our internal investigation team, confirming what I saw. I appreciate that, Mr. Davis, Zara replied. May I ask what you hope comes from all this? There was a brief pause before Raymond answered. Reform. Real change. I've worked in aviation for 20 years and seen too many incidents like yours dismissed or buried. If your case can break that pattern, it would benefit everyone. Our passengers and our employees who truly want to do right. As evening fell, Zara's hotel suite had transformed into something resembling a command center. Laptops, documents, and takeout containers covered every surface as the unlikely allies continued building their case. Jordan's insider knowledge, Derek's corporate connections, Isabella's public platform, and Zara's legal strategy combined to create mounting pressure that Atlantic Airways couldn't ignore. They'll try to contain this by focusing solely on Bethany Derek, warned experienced in corporate damage control, make her the bad apple while avoiding systemic examination. Which is exactly why we need to keep pushing for the independent investigation of all discrimination complaints, Zara replied. This was never just about one gate agent or one incident. It's about changing a culture that enables discrimination. Jordan nodded in agreement, then checked her watch. I should get back to my apartment. Tomorrow's board meeting could change everything one way or another. As her allies departed for the night, Zara stood at the hotel window overlooking the lights of Atlanta. Her Paris dream had been temporarily derailed, but something potentially more significant had taken its place. The passport in her hand represented more than just restored travel privileges. It symbolized her refusal to let injustice stand unchallenged. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. So proud of you, baby girl. You're fighting for all of us. Zara took a deep breath, steeling herself for tomorrow's confrontation. The investigation had revealed enough already to make one thing clear: what happened at Gate B-22 wasn't an isolated incident, but a symptom of a deeper problem, one she was now uniquely positioned to address. The Atlantic Airways corporate headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Atlanta. The boardroom, with its panoramic views of the city skyline, had hosted countless quarterly reports, strategic planning sessions, and crisis management meetings over the years. But the emergency session convened that morning had a different energy, tense, uncertain, with the unmistakable undercurrent of an organization facing a moment of reckoning. 12 board members sat around the massive mahogany table, most attending virtually from various locations across the country. At the head sat CEO William Pearson, a 60-year-old industry veteran known for his no-nonsense approach to airline management. James Whitfield sat stiffly in his usual place, his normally confident demeanor replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Patricia Coleman had positioned herself directly opposite him, a tactical choice that hadn't gone unnoticed. Let's get straight to the point, Pearson began, his voice filling the room. We have a situation that threatens significant damage to our brand, our customer relationships, and potentially our financial standing. Patricia, please bring everyone up to speed. Patricia nodded and activated the room's display screen. 2 days ago, a gate agent at Hartsfield-Jackson deliberately destroyed the passport of a black female passenger, Zara Washington, a recent law school graduate. She played the now infamous video, which several board members were seeing for the first time. Audible gasps followed the clear footage of Bethany Russell tearing the passport. The agent has been terminated, Patricia continued, but Miss Washington has declined our initial settlement offer. She's instead pushing for a comprehensive investigation into discriminatory practices and systematic changes to our policies. This is being blown out of proportion, Whitfield interjected. One employee's actions shouldn't trigger a company-wide witch hunt. Patricia's gaze hardened. James, the preliminary investigation has already uncovered a pattern of similar incidents, particularly involving the terminated employee who happens to be your sister-in-law. Many of these complaints were mysteriously dismissed during your review process. Several board members exchanged concerned glances. Furthermore, Patricia continued, Miss Washington has assembled considerable support. A business executive who witnessed the incident, an influential social media figure who captured additional footage, and several current Atlantic Airways employees who've come forward with corroborating accounts of discriminatory practices. What are our options? Asked board member Eleanor Chen, attending virtually from Chicago. From a legal standpoint, fighting this would be costly and damaging, responded Monica Winters, who had joined the meeting to provide legal counsel. Miss Washington has compelling evidence, credible witnesses, and a legitimate claim. Moreover, the publicity would be extremely negative, regardless of the outcome. CEO Pearson rubbed his temples. What exactly is she asking for? Beyond the obvious compensation, Patricia displayed a document on screen, an independent third-party investigation of all discrimination complaints for the past 5 years, mandatory anti-bias training developed by external experts, revision of our complaint resolution procedures, public transparency about the findings and changes implemented. That's excessive, Whitfield protested. The cost alone would be considerably less than the potential damage to our market value if this escalates further, interrupted board member Marcus Johnson, the company's former CFO. I've seen the social media metrics. This story is gaining traction hourly. There's something else, Patricia added, her tone measured. Miss Washington and her representatives have requested to address this meeting directly. They're waiting outside. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. That's highly unusual, Pearson noted. So is having an employee destroy a federal document on camera, Patricia replied evenly. I believe it would be beneficial to hear them out. After a brief discussion and vote, the request was approved. Minutes later, Zara Washington entered the boardroom, followed by Derek Mitchell, Jordan Harrison, and Isabella Rodriguez. The contrast between the corporate executives and this diverse coalition was immediately striking. Zara took her place at the podium, positioned at the foot of the table, her composure remarkable for someone facing such powerful figures. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, professional, confident, but her hair worn in its natural state, a subtle statement about authenticity and representation. Thank you for allowing us to address you today, she began, her voice clear and steady. 2 days ago, I approached an Atlantic Airways gate with the same excitement as any other passenger looking forward to a dream vacation. What happened next has been well documented. She gestured to the screen where her encounter with Bethany Russell had just been displayed. But what you may not fully appreciate is that this incident, while shocking, is not isolated. It represents a pattern that many travelers of color experience regularly, not just with your airline, but throughout the travel industry. She nodded to Jordan, who stepped forward. My name is Jordan Harrison. I've worked for Atlantic Airways for 8 years in various customer service roles. During that time, I've witnessed numerous incidents of discriminatory treatment that were either dismissed or inadequately addressed by management. Jordan presented data she had compiled, showing clear disparities in how complaints were handled based on the passenger's race and status level. These aren't just statistics, Jordan continued. Each number represents a real person who was humiliated, delayed, or denied service based on how they look. Derek Mitchell took his turn at the podium. I'm Derek Mitchell, Executive VP at Meridian Consulting. I fly over 150,000 miles annually with Atlantic Airways. What I witnessed at Gate B22 was unambiguous discrimination, but it's part of a larger pattern I've observed as a frequent traveler. He turned to address James Whitfield directly. Mr. Whitfield, I've been in corporate America long enough to recognize when systems are designed to protect certain people and disadvantage others. Your airline has that system, whether intentional or not. Isabella Rodriguez added her perspective, presenting screenshots of thousands of comments from other travelers who had shared similar experiences after seeing her post about Zara's incident. The public reaction to this incident isn't outrage over one bad employee, Isabella explained. It's recognition of a familiar experience that countless travelers have endured silently until now. Finally, Zara returned to the podium for her closing remarks. I stand before you, not just as someone who experienced discrimination, but as a representative of everyone who has faced similar treatment without the resources or platform to challenge it. You have an opportunity today to demonstrate real leadership. She paused, making eye contact with each board member before continuing. You can choose to treat this as a PR problem to be managed, offering me compensation in exchange for silence. Or you can recognize it as a moment for meaningful change, an opportunity to set a new standard for the entire industry. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. CEO Pearson was the first to respond. Ms. Washington, thank you for your directness. What would you consider a satisfactory resolution at this point? The terms I've already communicated through Ms. Coleman. Zara replied without hesitation. Independent investigation, systematic changes to policy, transparency about findings, and comprehensive anti-bias training. Plus, of course, appropriate compensation for my experience. And if we agree to these terms, Pearson pressed, then, instead of being known as the airline that discriminated against a passenger, you'll be recognized as the company that took a stand against discrimination when confronted with it. The choice seems clear from both a moral and business perspective. James Whitfield shifted uncomfortably. And what about the employees implicated in any investigation? Some might be unfairly targeted based on misunderstandings or cultural differences. Zara met his gaze steadily. Mr. Whitfield, fairness requires that all complaints receive equal scrutiny regardless of who files them or who they're filed against. That hasn't been happening at Atlantic Airways, particularly when complaints involve your sister-in-law. Whitfield flushed, but before he could respond, board member Eleanor Chen spoke up. I move that we accept Ms. Washington's terms in full. This incident has revealed vulnerabilities in our systems that pose significant risk to our reputation and frankly run counter to the values we claim to uphold. I second that motion, added Marcus Johnson. And I further suggest that Mr. Whitfield recuse himself from any involvement in the investigation given the clear conflict of interest. A vote was called, and despite Whitfield's objection, the motion passed decisively. CEO Pearson stood extending his hand to Zara. Miss Washington, you'll have Atlantic Airways' full cooperation. We'll announce the investigation publicly today and provide regular updates on findings and actions taken. As the meeting concluded and the coalition prepared to leave, Patricia approached them privately. What you've accomplished here today is unprecedented, she said, with genuine respect. You should know that there's already discussion about creating a new executive position focused on passenger advocacy and inclusion. The board would like to discuss that possibility with you, Miss Washington, when you're ready. Zara exchanged glances with her allies. Jordan, who had risked her career. Derek, who had delayed his business to stand beside her. Isabella, who had amplified her story to millions. What had begun as a traumatic incident had transformed into something none of them could have anticipated, a catalyst for genuine change. I'd be interested in that conversation, Zara replied. But first, I believe I have a rescheduled trip to Paris to take. 1 year later, Zara Washington stood on the observation deck of the Eiffel Tower, gazing out over the city of light as the setting sun cast a golden glow across the Parisian landscape. Beside her stood her mother Tamara, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears of pride. "I never thought I'd see this view," Tamara said softly, her weathered hand gripping the railing. "Your father would be so proud of what you've become." "What we've become," Zara corrected gently, putting an arm around her mother's shoulders. The journey that had brought them to this moment had been far different from the one Zara had originally planned when she'd saved for her post-graduation trip. Instead of a simple vacation, she had embarked on a transformative path that had changed not just her life, but the lives of countless other travelers. 6 months earlier, Zara had accepted the position of Executive Director of Passenger Advocacy and Inclusion at Atlantic Airways, a role created specifically for her, following the sweeping changes that had resulted from her confrontation with the airline's leadership. The independent investigation she had demanded had revealed systemic issues far beyond Bethany Russell's individual actions. Dozens of discrimination complaints had been improperly dismissed over the years, particularly those filed by passengers of color. James Whitfield had ultimately resigned when his role in suppressing those complaints became impossible to deny. The first-class tickets to Paris that Atlantic Airways had provided as part of Zara's compensation package had remained unused. Until now, she had been too busy implementing the very changes she'd fought for. Today marked both the fulfillment of her original dream and a celebration of what had been accomplished. Her phone vibrated with an incoming video call. On the screen appeared Jordan Harrison, now the VP of Customer Experience at Atlantic Airways. Her promotion, a recognition of her courage in exposing the truth. "How's the view?" Jordan asked, smiling broadly. "Even better than I imagined," Zara replied, turning the camera to capture the panorama. "How's the conference going?" "Packed house," Jordan reported. "Airline representatives from 4 continents, all here to learn about our new approach to passenger advocacy." Derek's keynote on corporate accountability was a hit. As if on cue, Derek Mitchell appeared in frame beside Jordan, his familiar face now a welcome sight. The business executive who had stood by Zara that fateful day had become a powerful ally in transforming the airline industry. His consulting firm now specialized in helping companies implement meaningful diversity and inclusion practices beyond mere lip service. "Enjoying Paris at last?" he asked. "Every minute," Zara confirmed. "And the best part, I overheard an American family at the Louvre today discussing how Atlantic Airways had the best record for fair treatment of all passengers. Your data transparency initiative is making waves." The initiative Derek referenced had been revolutionary in the industry. A public dashboard showing complaint statistics, resolution times, and satisfaction metrics, broken down by passenger demographics. What had once been hidden behind corporate secrecy was now a point of competitive pride, with other airlines scrambling to demonstrate their own commitment to equitable treatment. "Isabella sends her regards," Jordan added. She couldn't make the conference, but her social advocacy network has grown to over 20 partner organizations. The travel industry will never be the same. Isabella Rodriguez had leveraged her influencer platform into a full-fledged movement, connecting travelers who had experienced discrimination with resources and support. Her hashtag number, Traveling While Black, had evolved into a comprehensive rating system for transportation providers, holding companies accountable through the power of collective consumer experience. After ending the call, Zara and her mother descended from the tower and strolled along the Seine as twilight settled over the city. Street lamps flickered to life, their reflections dancing on the dark water. "Sometimes, I still can't believe how it all turned out," Tamara mused. "When you called me that day from the airport, I was devastated thinking about your ruined trip. I never imagined it would lead to all this." Zara nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about injustice, Mom. When you stand up to it, you never know how far the ripples will spread." The ripples had indeed spread far. The Zara Washington Foundation for Travel Equity, established with a portion of her settlement from Atlantic Airways, had already provided legal support to dozens of travelers facing discrimination. Kenneth Porter, the supervisor who had initially failed to intervene but later testified about the pattern of behavior he'd witnessed, now conducted training sessions for airport staff on bystander intervention. Even Raymond Davis had found redemption as a key advocate for operational changes that eliminated subjective decision-making and document verification processes. The system that had given Bethany Russell the power to destroy Zara's passport had been completely overhauled, with clear protocols and accountability measures now in place. As they approached a small cafe along the riverbank, Zara spotted a familiar face. Patricia Coleman, now the CEO of Atlantic Airways following William Pearson's retirement. Their planned coincidental meeting in Paris had been arranged weeks ago. "There she is," Zara said to her mother, "the woman who ultimately made the right decision when it mattered most." Patricia rose to greet them, embracing both women warmly. "The board meeting is set for next week," she said after they'd ordered coffee. "Your proposal for industry-wide standards on anti-discrimination training has strong support." "And the international expansion?" Zara inquired. "On track. We've already partnered with airlines in 27 countries to implement similar advocacy systems. Your blueprint is becoming the global standard." As they discussed the future initiatives, Zara felt a profound sense of purpose. What had begun as a personal nightmare had transformed into a mission that extended far beyond herself. The broken pieces of her passport, callously thrown into a trash can, had become the foundation for systemic change affecting millions of travelers worldwide. Later that evening, as Zara prepared to give the keynote address at the International Conference on Equitable Transportation, the real reason for this Paris trip, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The conference hall was filled with industry leaders, civil rights advocates, and government officials from around the world. As Zara took the stage, the applause was thunderous, recognition not just of her individual courage, but of the movement she had helped catalyze. 1 year ago, she began, her voice clear and confident. "I stood at an airport gate, watching my passport being deliberately destroyed, an act meant to diminish me, to deny my right to move freely through the world." The room fell silent, hundreds of attendees hanging on her every word. "I could have accepted compensation and moved on." Many would have understood that choice. But that moment at Gate B22 wasn't just about me. It was about every traveler who has ever been profiled, questioned, or denied service based on how they look. She paused, scanning the rapt faces before her. "Today I don't stand before you as a victim, but as a catalyst for change." The transformation we've witnessed in the airline industry proves what's possible when we refuse to accept discrimination as inevitable, when we demand accountability, when we transform moments of injustice into movements for equity. As Zara continued her address, outlining the concrete changes implemented and the measurable improvements in passenger experiences, she embodied the very transformation she described. From law student to international advocate, from targeted passenger to industry leader, her journey reflected the power of turning pain into purpose. The standing ovation that followed her speech lasted nearly 5 minutes. What had begun with a white gate agent throwing away a black woman's passport had culminated in an industry-wide reckoning. Bethany Russell's attempt to deny Zara Washington's journey had instead launched her on an unexpected path that had already improved the travel experiences of countless others. As Zara often told the advocacy teams she trained, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't just surviving it, it's using it to create a world where it can't happen to anyone else. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination while traveling? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If Zara's story inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, change happens when brave individuals refuse to accept injustice as normal. Thank you for watching, and may your own journeys be free from the barriers Zara fought to remove. This story of Zara Washington's confrontation with discrimination reveals powerful lessons about justice and transformation. First, it demonstrates that standing up against injustice often requires courage, strategy, and coalition building. Zara's legal training gave her tools, but her willingness to refuse silence was her true power. Second, we see how racism in everyday interactions isn't just about individual bias, but about systems that protect discriminatory behavior. Bethany's actions weren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern enabled by institutional protection. Third, the narrative shows that change requires both individual courage and institutional accountability. Zara's refusal to accept a private settlement forced the airline to address underlying issues rather than treating the symptom. Fourth, the power of documentation and evidence cannot be overstated. Without recordings and witnesses, Zara's experience might have been dismissed as misunderstanding or exaggeration. Finally, we learn that transforming injustice into meaningful change often requires looking beyond personal vindication towards systemic solutions. By focusing on policy changes rather than just personal compensation, Zara created impact far beyond her individual case. The transformation from victim to advocate represents a journey many have taken throughout history, turning personal pain into collective progress and creating pathways for others to travel with dignity where they once faced discrimination. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination while traveling? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Has an experience with racism ever inspired you to seek change rather than just compensation? If Zara's story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of everyday heroes standing against injustice. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one person's courage can create ripples of change throughout an entire industry. Thank you for watching, and remember, when we refuse to accept discrimination as normal, we help create a world where everyone can move through it with dignity and respect.